So, if you're someone who's into college football recruiting like myself, this weekend is one to watch because several institutions across the nation are set to host major visitors, including USC, Oklahoma, Texas, and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And we need to talk about what these weekends mean for each of these respective programs as they look to bolster their recruiting class. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe we're about to see an onset of commitments in the class of 2023, and let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I'm on my push to 15,000 subscribers, and I'd love to have you join the community as we make that push. If you enjoyed the content, like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself, in both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said, let's hop right into this, and we're going to start on the West Coast with USC, where Lincoln Riley is in an interesting situation as he has an opportunity to put a nice bow on the class of 2022 as well as get a nice head start in the class of 2023 and beyond. And that nice bow comes in the form of five-star offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr., the #1 player out the state of Washington for the class of 2022, who remains uncommitted. And one of the things I find so intriguing about this is Conerly is the second player in so many years from the state of Washington to go into this part of the year uncommitted, joining JT Tuimoloau, who ultimately went to Ohio State. Now, this is one we have to watch for USC because there would be no better way for Lincoln Riley to start his career with USC than by ending the 2022 recruiting cycle with one of the best players in the nation in Josh Conerly Jr., who happens to be one of my favorite offensive linemen from the past year's cycle. I was really high on Josh Conerly Jr., and because of that, I've been watching his recruiting process very closely. But this is something that would mean a great deal for Lincoln Riley, who relied so heavily on the transfer portal with his initial class, and who could blame him? But being able to get in an offensive tackle that has the talent that Conerly has is a win that we really can't understate, and because of that, we've got to watch this process going forward. But now we need to go to the Texas Longhorns because there's possibly no weekend in the nation going on right now that has as many talented recruits as what Texas is hosting. They have got a lot of names we've got to watch, headlined by none other than the #1 player in the nation, Arch Manning. And Arch Manning is bringing Ruben Owens along with him. And this is a dynamic duo we need to watch because in no way, shape, or form have I heard anything that says they're a package deal, and I wouldn't believe it if it was something that was out there. But what I will note is this. These two have taken visits together in the past. They visited Texas together in the past, and they seem to have a good relationship. So getting them together on a visit for the Longhorns this weekend, in a weekend where there's already so many other top recruits, bodes well for Texas as the Longhorns are going all in on Arch Manning. They've made him their #1 priority, not only in terms of quarterback, but I think in terms of prospect in general. But it's not just the offensive firepower Texas is set to have this weekend. We can also look at the defensive side of the ball where five-star defensive lineman David Hicks is also set to be in attendance. And that's where we really have to look because Texas has offensive weapons right now. Luckily for the Longhorns, getting in Quinn Ewers ensures some sort of quarterback plan for the recent future, not to mention Malik Murphy and Hudson Card. But if you're able to get in a five-star defensive lineman like David Hicks, that is something that could be of massive benefit to the Texas Longhorns. And I'm not saying Arch Manning wouldn't be of massive benefit. He would be a huge win for Steve Sarkisian and company. I'm saying the defense needs help, and David Hicks can give you that help immediately once he steps on campus. So we have to watch his recruiting process. Texas is not the only Texas school pursuing Hicks very closely, as Texas A&M has also made their presence felt in this battle, and Oklahoma looks to also make sure they are not left in the fold, and hiring Todd Bates is something that's really helped Oklahoma in this. But that takes us to the Oklahoma Sooners, where they are also putting together a really nice event this weekend, and it's not just in the class of 2023. We're going to start in the class of 2023, but my goodness gracious, they are well represented in the class of 2024 there. But starting in the class of 2023, there's one battle in particular that Oklahoma is a part of, and they're getting this guy in this weekend, and I think that's big, and that's Caden Green, the offensive tackle, who is going to be a major priority for several institutions across the nation. So getting him in on a weekend that's already filled with so many top-level recruits already bodes well for the Sooners' chances. And anytime we're talking about Oklahoma offensive line recruiting, we have to talk about Bill Bedenbaugh, who's one of the best in the business at this. So anytime you see the Sooners pursuing an offensive lineman and it's at this stage, you know it's real. So we have to watch Caden Green specifically because he's someone that every institution in the top for him wants. But OU getting him there is very interesting. Another name we have to watch is Makari Vickers, a very talented defensive back who's wanted by many institutions, but ultimately Oklahoma gets him in this weekend. But that moves us to the class of 2024. Because if you want to have a conversation about 5 stars, goodness gracious me, we can have that conversation about 5 stars for Oklahoma in the class of 2024 in terms of being represented in the visits this weekend. Whether we're talking about Zena Umazulu, Stacey Gage, Colin Simmons, Heaven Brown Schuler, or T.A. Cunningham, Oklahoma has got names to watch. And it's never too early to start laying the foundation for these prospects. Getting them in this weekend is a great way to get them acclimated to the new staff, to get them familiar with the new staff, a staff that's so big on tangible relationships, and what a better way to start establishing those relationships than this weekend. So, we've got to watch what Oklahoma is able to do this weekend. We've got to watch the buzz coming out of the weekend and also understand that buzz is always high coming out of these weekends, but it's what can you establish long term that ultimately matters, and that's what we need to watch. And look, that's something Brent Venables has talked about, and that's one of the reasons why he hasn't had kids, and he's talked against kids committing immediately. He wants to make sure they're in it for the right reasons, and so that's the type of established relationship I'm alluding to right here. And finally, do you think we could talk about recruiting without visiting my Tide? Forget about it. Because this weekend, I want to highlight 2 prospects for Alabama that we've got to keep an eye on. First and foremost, on the offensive line, Nick Saban has dubbed himself king of recruiting, and he might just be king of the transfer portal. No, he doesn't pull a lot of players from the transfer portal, but the ones he pulls, my goodness, he makes sure he gets the impactful ones. And he could be looking in the transfer portal for another one, an offensive lineman, Tyler Steen. And this is something we've talked about in the past, but being able to get him on campus, I think, puts Alabama in a really interesting position, and that's a position group that we've talked about having concerns about going into next season. Is there talent in the room? Absolutely. But there is a lot of young names that need to step up in a position group and offensive line that's very tough to pick up coming out of high school. I've talked about this extensively, so I'm not going to waste your time much on it now. But the difference in speed, technique, and strength from high school football to college football in the trenches is astronomical. And so I'm never surprised when a freshman doesn't play. I'm not surprised when sophomores don't play. But for Alabama this year, they're going to need some of those 5 stars to step up and start contending for those positions. And that's why we see Tyler Steen making a visit this weekend. And ultimately, if Coach Nick Saban wants him, Coach Nick Saban should go get him, and I have full faith in Nick Saban. But the last prospect we're going to talk about on this video for Alabama and in general is a quarterback, an Eli Holstein, and this is one we've got to watch. Alabama was one of the finalists in the battle for Nico Iamaleava. Ultimately, Tennessee wins that, and Alabama is in a really good position in the battle for Arch Manning as well, along with Texas, Georgia, and several others. But ultimately, the Crimson Tide have identified another quarterback that they like, and that's none other than former Texas A&M commit Eli Holstein, who recently decommitted from the Aggies and is now making a visit to Tuscaloosa, something that if you're an Alabama fan, you love to see. And quarterback is an interesting position in this year's class. Is it one that you would like to take? Absolutely. You'd like to get a quarterback every single year. But Alabama has been very lucky in their pursuit of top-level signal callers, not only with Bryce Young, but then you look, Jalen Milroe is somebody that the staff was very high on. He needs to continue his progression as a passer, but if that progression happens, you're talking about a very talented individual, someone we seriously cannot overlook. And then we fast forward a year into last year's cycle where Alabama pulled a 5-star quarterback in Ty Simpson, who early enrolled and is now getting the benefit of those reps with the members of the Crimson Tide team. So if the Tide is to miss on quarterback this year, it would be a miss in terms of literal meaning of the word. But in terms of quarterback talent, Alabama loves what they have on roster. Getting in a quarterback this cycle would just be an added benefit. But ultimately, I can't wait to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about this weekend, and let me know if you think that we're about to see an onset of commitments. That's it. See ya.